The forecast is calling for rainstorms and temperatures approaching freezing, and I'm hiking out to camp in it alone. Usually I plan to camp in nice weather. It's easier and I get to enjoy some sunshine and beautiful views here in the Canadian Rockies. But on this trip, I want to put my ultralight gear to the test to see whether I can stay warm, comfortable, and dry, maybe even enjoy myself while dealing with a couple days of rain. On the flip side, it's completely possible that my supposedly waterproof pack leaks, soaking all the gear inside of it, my gear isn't warm enough, and I end up miserable and having to bail on a trip that I've been looking forward to all week. It just started raining a little bit. It's supposed to be kind of off and on throughout the afternoon here and then really pick up with a lot of rain coming once I get to camp in throughout the evening. Fingers crossed it doesn't start really raining until after I get to camp, because there's nothing worse than getting to camp and having to set up in pouring rain. That being said, I do have some tricks up my sleeve that I'm going to share with you guys that makes camping and setting up in rain a little bit easier. There are 3 tools that I use in order to combat rain. The first one is kind of a last resort because I just don't like using it, and that's a full rain suit. On this trip and on any trip where I'm expecting a lot of rain, I'll bring a full set of rain pants. These are ultralight rain pants from Z-Packs. And then I'll bring a rain jacket as well. I only put on the rain suit if it's raining a lot, because I find that no matter what the rain suit is, I overheat inside of it and I end up sweating and getting wet on the inside anyways. Even with rain jackets like this that have big pit zips in them, I still overheat and I'm still sweating a lot. That being said, if it's really raining hard, a rain suit's gonna do one important thing, and that's gonna be keeping you warm. It also will keep you from getting like completely saturated. You'll be moist on the inside, but not soaking wet. The second tool is something that I really like for conditions like this, where it's supposed to be raining off and on and not really downpouring too hard, and that's an umbrella. An umbrella is nice because you're not gonna overheat inside of it. You just put it up and you have essentially unlimited ventilation under it, but it does prevent you from getting soaking wet when you're underneath it. It's a lot more convenient than off and on rain than a rain jacket, because you can just take it out, easily put it up, easily put it away, as opposed to having to take your pack off, put a rain jacket on, take your pack off, take a rain jacket off over and over again. The third and probably most important tool for combating rain when you're on trail is the pack, and that's because it's keeping everything dry that you need in order to be warm once you get to camp. The most dangerous part of backpacking and camping in the rain isn't getting wet, it's getting cold as a result of being wet. And while it's really easy to stay warm when you're hiking and moving on trail, once you get to camp and stop moving, that's when the danger really sets in. Normally I use a pack liner inside of my pack in order to keep all my essentials dry, like my sleeping system and all my clothes. But on this trip, I'm taking a bit of a gamble with the Durston Wapta 30 pack, because it's kind of touted as being waterproof. Dan would never say that outright because it's a little bit dangerous to make that kind of bold claim, but the material is waterproof and all the seams are taped, and then you have a roll top just like you would with a dry bag. So I have all of my critical gear that I need to stay dry inside the pack loosely, and I'm kind of just hoping that it stays dry if it does start to rain a lot. I made it to camp, and I'm a little surprised because in the past this campground has been pretty rustic, but when I got here today there's tent pads and bare bins, and it's pretty swanky now. There's new outhouses, so I'm not gonna be able to talk with you guys that much about campsite selection. I was planning on giving you guys the basics, like make sure that you're not setting up in a low area that might pool with water. Protect yourself from the wind, so make sure there's a lot of tree cover around you, because wind compounds the problem of rain, and you'd be surprised at how much rain can get blown in underneath the bottom of your tent. The third campsite selection tip is, if you do have the opportunity to set up underneath trees, especially trees with big canopies, because if you don't have a tarp like I do here, we'll get into the tarp in a second, then that tree canopy can provide quite a bit of cover for you and keep you drier than you'd expect. If rain is in the forecast, the first thing that I do is I set up my tarp, because that gives me kind of a home base in order to unpack my pack and make sure that I'm not getting everything inside of my pack soaked as I unpack it. If I can, I'll center the tarp over top of a picnic table. And if it's not raining at that moment, then I may only set it up halfway. So if it started raining right now, I could easily just take this one guy line, pull the tarp over, attach it to this end of the tarp, and then have myself a nice little sheltered area on the picnic table there. If I have time, I might even find like a stick or something and then wedge that into the picnic table so I get a little bit more height on this end. After the tarp, I set up my tent, and if it's raining or there's rain in the forecast, you bet your bottom dollar that I'm bringing a tent that has an all-in-one or fly first pitch. With a fly first pitch, instead of setting up the inner and then putting the fly over top of it, you set up the fly first. Some examples of tents that have this fly first feature are the Sea to Summit Telos, as well as the Big Agnes Tiger Wall, as long as you have the footprint for the Tiger Wall. What I think is an even better system than a fly first pitch is an all-in-one system. So the fly and the inner are attached together. So as you set the tent up, everything just goes up as one, and you're keeping the inside of the tent dry. Once I have the tent set up, I'll take my pack, stick it kind of as close to the door as I can, and then just start firing stuff inside the tent, making sure that I'm keeping the inside as dry as possible. After seeing all this gear, I haven't even seen all of it yet. I haven't shared with you guys my cook system and then the clothing that I brought with me and my sleep system. You might be surprised that this kit is ultralight, but I have been able to keep my base weight under 10 pounds on this trip, which is pretty crazy considering that I'm set up pretty comfortably for the rain. If you also want to lower your pack weight, then I recommend taking a look at the sponsor of today's video, Garage Run Gear. They're easily the best place out there in order to check out ultralight gear. I've talked about them before. They've been a sponsor of this channel for years, but I can pretty much guarantee that there's gear on Garage Run Gear that you have never seen before. Even for me, I've been to that site hundreds of times. I've combed through all the different accessories and tents and quilts and sleeping pads, and every time I visit, there's something new in order to check out. And if you want to see that gear for yourself, I'll have a link to Garage Growing Gear's new gear page down in the video description so you guys can go take a look. It started cooling off quite a bit, and that combined with the ominous clouds in the distance has me thinking that it's probably going to rain in the next few hours here. So I want to make sure that I have everything kind of buckled down so that I'm ready for that rain and can still hang out outside of my tent and don't have to just retreat as soon as it starts raining. But I have switched into warmer clothes. Like I said, it's probably going to get down to around freezing tonight, so I brought quite a bit of warm clothes and a warm sleep system. But the warmth gear that I brought with me is different than I'd bring if I wasn't really expecting that much rain. And that's because I want gear that's going to perform if it's wet or if it's just kind of a little bit damp because of the humidity in the air. So what that means is that most of my gear, other than a couple notable exceptions, is made with synthetic materials. Synthetic materials just deal with moisture and getting wet a lot better than materials like down or even merino wool. When down gets wet, it just sort of like clumps up and then turns into this bally mess, whereas synthetic material, like the material to make this jacket, is going to do a few things in order to perform well if it is raining. The two main benefits of synthetic materials are that they're going to keep you warmer if they get a little bit damp or wet, and they're also going to dry a lot faster if they do get wet. So if there's a little bit of sun and you're laying all your gear out to dry, you're not going to have to wait hours and hours. The two exceptions are my base layer, which is made of alpaca fiber. Alpaca fiber is pretty much a miracle fiber because it has all the benefits of merino wool, like odor protection, keeping you warm when it's a little bit wet, but it's a little bit lighter weight, and it also doesn't hold on to nearly as much moisture. So you get all the benefits of a synthetic material, but then also all the benefits of those natural materials like merino wool. The other item that's made with non-synthetic materials is my sleeping bag. So I am using a sleeping bag on this trip, partly because I just don't like fiddling around with pad straps if it's raining and I have my butt sticking out outside of the tent. And this sleeping bag also uses hydrophobic down, which is going to perform better if it does get a little bit humid out and there's a lot of condensation. The reason I went with down versus a synthetic quilt or sleeping bag is because down just compresses a whole lot more. And if you're getting down to sleeping bags rated to freezing or less, then those synthetic options get really bulky really quick. If you want to see all the gear that I brought on this trip and not just what I picked and chose in order to share with you guys, or you want to double check that I am ultralight, then I'll have a link to my Pack Wizard gear list down below. I feel pretty lucky that it hasn't started raining yet, so I'm gonna take advantage of that and make hay while the sun shines, or in this case, make dinner while the sun shines. Even though I'm ultralight on this trip, I have a full cook system in order to boil some water and make a nice dehydrated meal. It hasn't started raining. I just got that little bit of drizzle as I was hiking in. And it's pretty crazy because I checked 4 different weather models and all 4 predicted that it would be raining over the course of this evening. But I'm a little bit wary that it's gonna rain at some point overnight or maybe into the morning. And as much as it sucks setting up camp in the rain, packing up in the rain is much, much worse. But I'm a sucker for punishment and I love a good teaching moment. So fingers crossed it's raining in the morning so I can share with you guys my tips and tricks for taking down camp in the rain, packing up while keeping everything dry and not wanting to like stab my eyes out with frustration. Good night, and I'll see you guys in the morning. Good morning. It drizzled a little bit last night, but it's not raining this morning, so you could consider this a failed camping in the rain trip. But I'm still going to share with you guys the steps that I take in order to pack up my gear when it is raining in the morning, because there's some specific steps that I take that I think are really important. The key is staying inside of your warm, dry tent as long as possible. So if you're not in bear country, that could involve eating your breakfast as soon as you wake up while you're still in your warm, dry clothes. But I'm in bear country, so that's not gonna be a possibility for me this morning. This is one of the reasons why if I know it's gonna rain and I'm going on a solo trip, I'll often bring a 2-person tent. So I have that extra space in order to move around the tent and get things packed up without hitting the sidewalls, which might have condensation or moisture on them. The second reason is that 2-person tents often have 2 vestibules, and I don't like getting out of my tent to pee, especially if it's at night. So 2 vestibules, I can store my gear in one, pee into the other, and I don't need to worry about peeing all over my gear or stepping in it in the morning. The first thing I'll do is I'll bring in my pack inside the tent, and then I'll pack up my sleep system, rolling up my sleeping pad and stuffing in my top insulation. A little hack for rolling up a sleeping pad inside of a confined space like a tent: once you have it folded based on the short edge, just kind of give it one fold over top of itself along the long edge so you can then roll it up in a much tighter space. I'll even fully change into my hiking clothes even if they're wet, because I really want to protect my dry gear as much as possible. So that sleep system and my dry clothes. Once I have all my gear into the vestibule, that's where this little Swedish cloth comes into play. If it's raining, you're almost guaranteed to have condensation on the inside walls of your tent, and I like to wipe it off using the Swedish cloth. It's why I actually prefer single wall tents to double wall tents. With double wall tents, you're not gonna have less condensation inside the tent. That inner wall just provides a physical barrier between you and the condensation that's on the fly. But the double wall also makes it a lot more difficult to wipe down the tent. Whereas with a single wall tent, I can really easily get access to that inner wall, wipe off all the condensation, and then squeeze out the water into the vestibule. If you're dealing with multiple days of rain, wiping down the inside of your tent is gonna make setting up camp at your next campsite a whole lot nicer. Once I exit the tent, I'm done with the tent. I put everything underneath the tarp because the tarp's the last thing that I pack up before I start hiking for the day. If it's not raining too hard in the morning, I'll also wipe down the outside of the tent so I'm not carrying as much water weight while I'm hiking. That's one of the big benefits of Dyneema tents like this one, is they don't really hold on to any rain or moisture. So if you have a chance to wipe them down, then you're not really carrying any extra weight once you get on trail. It didn't really rain much on the trip, but I was prepared. I would have had a ton of fun on this trip, even if it did rain. Big reason for that is the tarp and then the spacious tent. Without those 2 things, you end up just kind of hunkering down in a tiny tent and it's not a whole lot of fun. Whereas if you do have the tarp, then you can just hang out underneath it at a picnic table, on a log, whatever. And it's great as well if you have a ton of people with you, because then you can all kind of hang out still, not have to retreat to your tents. Remember that I said that a big benefit of this pack is that it's waterproof and I don't need to bring a pack liner. Something that I'm just realizing is that the pack liner doesn't just keep the gear inside of it dry. It also acts as a separator for that dry gear to anything else that's inside the pack. So if I have a soaking wet tent because it's been raining, I can still put this inside the pack with all that other gear that's protected by the pack liner. Without a pack liner, I have to put any gear that's wet on the outside of the pack so that I'm protecting everything on the inside. And that ends up being really efficient packing. And because of that, I'll probably just keep bringing a pack liner on all my trips. It's not super heavy, and the peace of mind of being able to separate my dry gear from my wet gear inside my pack is really nice. If you want to see a trip where I deal with some real rain for a few days in a row, go check out this video right up here. I'm beach camping on an island off the coast of Canada, and it was one of the coolest trips I've ever done, and it goes over a lot of different experiences in the rain.